Okay, let's get started. So welcome everyone. We're so thrilled to have you here today for this info session about Funding Futures, a new training and grants program from Partners for Climate Action. Um, I am Vanessa Bertozzi. I work for Partners for Climate Action, and I'm also on the Village Board in Rhinebeck. And Paige, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Paige Wayne, and I work with Vanessa. I'm a co-founder of Partners for Climate Action, and I'm on the CSC task force in Austerlitz, where I live.
Great. So, our agenda for today, we're going to talk about the impetus or why we decided to start this new program, an overview of how it works, the timeline of the grants and program cycle, and then some other details about the application. That'll take maybe about 20 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A. So, please hold your questions till the end. Okay, so. Why did we decide to start this Funding Futures program? Um, PCA gives grants and support in the Hudson Valley to repair ecosystems, to draw down emissions, to enhance resiliency to these intense storms and all the changes that we're seeing. And our mission is to catalyze bioregional climate action. So for Funding Futures, Paige and I really we leaned into this word catalyze and we asked ourselves and dozens of partners and colleagues that we talked to during the development of this, well, what does it really take for work to be catalyzing and then to continue to have success on into the future? And so our theory of change at PCA is that it comes down to people at the local level who are engaged, empowered, and connected. And this takes community building, which means everyone needs to be heard and invested. And we need to get offline, we need to get off those screens and reconnect with our neighbors. And this requires capacity building, capacity to have these conversations and to come to consensus together. So Paige and I set about designing a training program that would give structure and funding to this capacity building piece. And we've also seen and heard from lots of colleagues how even communities who are able to do successful community planning processes, then those plans often sit on a shelf, unfortunately, and that's often because of a lack of funding. So with Funding Futures, we wanted to design it such that we could bring in experts to explain and inspire around other funding mechanisms. And then finally, we need tangible plans that emerge from consensus. And the buy-in isn't something that you're trying to get after the fact, but rather that it should come through the process itself. So that's a little bit about the why. Now, I'll run through a quick overview of the program. Funding Futures is a one-year program. We will be selecting four communities. Um, as I mentioned, PCA works in the Hudson Valley bioregion, which means basically the watershed, and that technically runs all the way from, Albany, Troy down to the Atlantic. But for the purposes of this Funding Futures opportunity, eligible applicants are in towns located within these counties. So mid-Hudson-ish, lower Capital Region-ish. I'm going to speak about two aspects of the Funding Futures program, the training and the grants. First, the training, which will focus on empowering these four Funding Futures fellows to run a community conversations process in each of their towns. So you could also think of this as sort of like a listening campaign. And then the fellows will also learn about these financial models that they could take advantage of in their own communities to fund the community identified projects that flow from the listening campaign. And the fellows will be participating in a peer-to-peer cohort with the other three fellows. So those of you who may be familiar with a program that Paige and I ran called Local Champions, you know that we strongly believe in the cohort model, the power of taking a small group of folks through a structured process together bears exponential benefits. The cohort model offers a trusted space for feedback, encouragement, alternate points of view, and healthy pushback, and new ideas, and dare I say, learning from each other's mistakes. And then as for the grant aspect of funding futures, here are some details. This is not a reimbursement grant. However, PCA will require details on how the money will be spent. So part of the application is a sketch of an anticipated budget. And then before we disperse funds to the four selected applicants, they will be submitting like a more detailed budget as those details become clear, as they start planning their process, their community conversation process, and the staffing element becomes more clear as you get deeper into the project. So yes, so the detailed budget will be required before disbursement of the grant. And the money will be direct deposited into the tax exempt entity that's associated with the application. PCA is only able to grant funds to other tax exempt organizations. So this is why your application needs to be associated with a tax exempt entity. Um, and then up to $10,000 for hard costs of the community conversation process, and up to 12,000 for yeah, here it is, up to $12,000 for staffing, administrative costs. So you could think of this as, the 10,000 is for the hard costs like mailers, hosting events and supplies, that sort of thing. And then the staffing could be um, uh, for the actual management of the process. And one payment would be upfront and then one midway through for the staffing. So, the goal of the program is that each community emerges from this process with a grounded understanding of its priorities and agreements on desired financial models that could make their priorities a reality. And we want you to get specific project ideas and have a pitch for how to tackle them and next steps for planning. Okay, so in this next section, I'm going to actually speak to some of the questions we've already fielded since announcing this application. Um, so Funding Futures is all about community planning. This PCA opportunity is not a grant for a specific shovel-ready climate action project that you already have in mind and have your heart set on, or that an individual group wants to do. For those sorts of specific projects that you're ready to like get those shovels into the ground, those are probably better suited for some of PCA's other offerings, such as the ecological restoration grants or building decarbonization grants. But what Funding Futures really helps you do is just spark a conversation in your town about environmental priorities. So specific priorities and projects will emerge from the process, and Funding Futures is going to help you, build in that buy-in for the projects with the community. Um, but they should emerge from the process itself. And then further, Funding Futures will help you figure out how to identify some funding sources that could help those projects. So again, in essence, Funding Futures is about catalyzing the capacity building and identifying priorities around the environment. And this PCA opportunity is nonpartisan. We really believe that everyone cares about living in a thriving and healthy community. Um, that said, we know this is an extremely partisan time at the federal level. But our belief is really reconnecting locally is an antidote to the partisan divide. So, Funding Futures does ask you to set aside all of that and to focus on your local community. And so, if you don't think personally, you're able to set aside partisan politics and always be regrounding in what's local and what matters here and what do we care about as neighbors, then maybe this program is not for you. Um, and this is a social process for a whole community. But we do believe we need someone to carry the torch. And so, similar to PCA's Local Champions program, we bring together that cohort of point people, each from a different town. And we're calling that person the Funding Futures Fellow, right? And they're attending the office hours, the Zooms that we host with expert guest speakers, receiving expert coaching that each of the four communities will get. And then generally speaking, the Funding Futures Fellow is the main contact for PCA for the program. And and now one of the first things the Funding Futures Fellow will be doing is creating a stakeholder team. And of course, they can invite those other members of the team to the Zooms or to delegate tasks to them. This is a team project. But at the end of the day, PCA just needs a single contact who's going to see this project through for the entire 1 year cycle. And so we're calling that person the Funding Futures Fellow. And we've also heard some people say, hey, this sounds a lot like a comprehensive planning process. And there are similarities. But Funding Futures is focused specifically on the environment, land use, ecosystems, whereas a comp plan could have a broader set, a broader parameter, covers more topics. So we could see how Funding Futures could spark a conversation in a community and build its capacity to have these deep conversations, and that could lead into a comprehensive plan process. Or maybe um, that's one of the things that a community decides it wants to do as the next step is like undertake a comp plan process. Or say your community recently redid its comp plan, and there's, a whole laundry list of recommendations, and a set of those are related to the environment. Doing Funding Futures could help you work with the community to prioritize those ideas, and help the community kind of coalesce around specific projects and specific next steps. Okay, now we're going to walk through the 1 year timeline. So we're in the application period now. Deadline is May 23rd. We'll be here before we know it. Late May through mid-June, Paige and I will be doing follow-up interviews with applicants. So this is, I guess, an extension of the application period. And then we would announce our selections late June, the four communities. Then in July, we're kind of getting started, introduction to the process. You're working on building your stakeholder groups. And then in August, the stakeholder groups would each get together at a special place in their town. And PCA has partnered with a facilitator who will be doing a nature-based workshop with each stakeholder group in their town. And this is also when you start planning what your process is going to look like, and start learning about different financial models. Then in September, you're really getting into planning your community outreach and events. October through December, you're hosting your events. These could be a big event at let's say like a brewery with a mic. Everybody gets 3 minutes to say what their ideas are. This could be focus groups. This could be one-on-one outreach and interviews. This is sort of your idea gathering, listening campaign. Then in January, you'd be analyzing the results of that process and developing a ballot that you would literally be mailing to everyone in town, with the top ideas that the community identified. Then in the spring, February, March, April, that's really kind of a get out the vote part of your listening campaign, and further community engagement. And then in May, you're sharing back the results with your community, and you'll probably have volunteers who will emerge through the process and be interested in projects. So it's follow up with them. and developing the plan that you want to pitch. What are the priorities? What are the projects? Okay. And then in June, you're finalizing that plan and the financial models that you want to explore. And you're doing a final presentation to your community and to your town board. Okay, I'm going to just quickly run through the application. We're almost done now. Okay, application, there are 5 requirements, all due on May 23rd. We have created a bunch of tips and optional top templates for you to use. Those are all located on the web page under the application section of the web page. There's a drop down. I think it's called Step 1, and that's where these documents and downloads are available. Okay, so the first piece is a letter of interest. You are welcome to email this to us, to Paige and myself, sooner rather than later, if you'd like. What we do want you to determine is which tax exempt entity you'll be applying with. PCA, as I mentioned before, can only give grants to tax exempt entities. So if you're an individual, you would have to find, say, see if your local government would want to sponsor this, or like a library or a school or other community nonprofit in your town. If you don't have a tax exempt entity that's willing to do this, the Good Work Institute in Kingston could serve as your fiscal sponsor. And then the second item, so even if you're having the money flow through the town board and town board is involved in your application, um, we still need all applicants to submit a letter of support from their town board. And we require this because we really want you to be set up for success, and we don't want funding futures projects to inadvertently end up in a, perceived power struggle between the local government and this project. So, most town boards only have one meeting a month. So, keep an eye on that. Reach out to your town board as soon as you can. Get on the agenda um, for a town board meeting and make sure you're getting those letters of support from the town board. And Paige and I are also happy to reach out and talk to your town board members or your town supervisor about this opportunity. We're happy to, come and give a presentation at a town board meeting. Just let us know how we can help. Okay, and then thirdly, we would like to see a number of letters of support from organizations, businesses, institutions, even individuals in your who are important in your community. And so in a way, this piece of the application is sort of a test for us to see, are you willing to jump into this process and start, you know, connecting and calling on those relationships that you have in a town or reaching out to folks that you've always been wanting to bring into a process like this. So no set number of letters of support are required, but we encourage you to try to go for it. Okay, the fourth item is the budget. Again, this is kind of a sketch of a budget. In a way, this is sort of a forcing mechanism to start you thinking about, well, what's the scope of this project for me? Thinking about the population of your town, how many people you're trying to reach, and what are your skills that you would be bringing to bear versus other aspects of a communication plan that you might need to outsource. Maybe you would want to pay a graphic designer a little bit, or maybe you want to hire an intern to help manage the events, that sort of a thing. And then the last item here is actually like there is an online form. It reiterates kind of the other 4 elements of the application that need to be, because those 4 elements need to be emailed to us, but the form captures basic, contact information and kind of the nuts and bolts of your application. And that should be pretty easy. Um, so yeah, again, just remember to check for those tips and optional templates. I think they'll give you a better idea of what we're looking for. Um, yeah, just some thoughts on like elements of a strong application. This is more about fit than like good or bad. We're really looking, for example, for probably smaller population towns, not cities or counties. Probably, to be honest, just due to the scope of the funding we're able to offer, the 1 year duration of the program, we want you to be able to go broad and deep in your community. And we think, given the level of grant money and 1 year, that's probably easier to do in a lower population place. Um, and again, multiple letters of support from different groups or institutions, showing your willingness to start that community bridge building process. And then finally, demonstration that you're really dedicated to this and that you're really excited, and that you have the time and the ability to devote yourself to this project and see it all the way through. Okay, so with that, let's turn to some Q&A. Folks want to, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you like.
I have a question.
Yes.
My name's Polly and I'm in the town of Amenia. But
Hi.
first of all, our watershed goes to the Housatonic.
Yes. Okay, Polly. Ooh, good question. You know what? We think of ourselves as working in the Hudson Valley watershed, but you're within the county
Yeah,
structure.
yeah.
So it's like one of those weird things where like, the bioregion doesn't exactly map up with the governmental boundaries of counties. So let's
Okay.
go
All
let's go
right.
with the
So,
county. Let's go with the counties. Yeah.
okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Deborah.
Oops, sorry. Hi there. So you answered in the chat that this is the town is the base of that. So we would, like, for instance, if Philmont and Claverack applied together
Yeah.
and we would need the town board, but I assume, and let me know if this is the case, that letters of support from the mayor or the village could go in as additional letters.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good look, Deborah. That would be great. And you know, we have been talking back and forth a little bit about the relationship between a village and a town. The reason we want the kind of like the purview of the project to be town-wide is because we want people to be thinking about natural resources that are typically, maybe more visible or located in a town than just a village. But let's say you have, for instance, just as an example, let's say you have a really active climate smart task force in the village level, and one of them wants to be the Funding Futures Fellow. That's fine. That's
Okay.
all well and good. Yeah, you would just need to have buy-in through that letter of support from the larger town. Yeah. Or even if you wanted to have the grant money, flow into the village coffers and the village is dispersing. That's the tax exempt entity associated with it. That's fine. We just need that buy-in from the larger town board.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question, but I'm going to let other people ask and then come back to me if you would.
Okay.
Nessa, we have a
Uh,
chat question. Um, Keisha is asking, would you be comfortable with the Land Conservancy serving as the 501(c)(3), but working with the town as a stakeholder? I think we'd be fine with that, right? The
Yeah.
actual nonprofit wouldn't necessarily have to just serve that town. So that
Yeah.
would,
Yeah. I think that would be great.
yeah, me too.
Vanessa at Simon Strauss in the town of Olive.
Hello.
Could you expand a little bit more on the desired financial models and what you're looking for there, or what you're expecting to be able to explain to the cohort?
Sure, yeah. So, one of the things that we're really interested in, because we've seen real success with it, is communities moving forward with a community preservation plan and fund, and then doing a real estate transfer tax. We think that's a really exciting model that we would be introducing to the cohort. Um, and we're also interested in some new movement towards community-owned solar. So that would be another item that we would be discussing as a way to be able to leverage that as basically like equity, as well as the financial benefits flowing into the community rather than being, you know, drawn out by a corporate entity. We'll also be talking about, we'll have some sessions around crowdfunding. Um, we'll show some examples of that. We'll also be talking about best practices when trying to connect with local, like family foundations or other groups, local banks. Um, and so these will mostly be us bringing in guest speakers who would be explaining these different financial models.
Another might would be participatory budgeting.
Mhm.
Christopher says it's a little difficult to hear. Um,
Can you give a quick synopsis of what you mean by participatory budgeting when you after you address the volume?
Can,
sure.
can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear
Yeah.
fine.
Right.
Okay. Christopher, I think it might be on your end. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Deborah, participatory budgeting is when the community is given a chance to talk through how to spend a budget. So it would be, in collaboration with the town or whatever budget was on the table, to talk through, some financial organizations do this, and then the people get to meet. And so people who may be charging interest to another group would hear that, Joe needs money for his cows, or the lender could give a little more. So it humanizes the process, but also allows for people's voices to be heard in terms of needs and the general well-being of the community. So it's a practice that's done with various financial institutions and also communities.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be like the entire budget. It could be, a portion that's earmarked for participatory budgeting.
Um, can I ask about the Funding Futures Fellow and if that can be plural? If there's a clear outline of how that's staffed and how you see that group or pair of people,
Yeah,
you think of that?
sure. So, it could be plural for sure. We just need at least one person who is going to be, the ultimately on the hook for this project that would be seeing it all the way through. But that person, you know, is welcome to invite others to participate as fully as they can. And that means attending the Zooms with expert speakers. We'll have some one-on-one coaching. That would be, you know, the person who's responsible for making sure the money is flowing through and how it had been budgeted for. Those are kind of the responsibilities of the Funding Futures Fellow. And I think when it comes to like that up to $12,000 for staffing, in some cases, the Funding Futures Fellow might be like, I'm gonna, devote, say, 12 hours a week to this project for a year. I need to be paid. I need to be compensated for that. Like, that's just my financial situation. And that's fine, as long as that Funding Futures Fellow thinks that they can do all the tasks and really be and do all that and or find volunteers to help do stuff for them gratis. Or the funding futures might be an individual who's like, hey, I don't need to be paid. I want to volunteer to do this, but I really like to use up to that $12,000 to pay, an assistant who's going to be like my coordinator for the project, or any various tasks that need to be kind of brought in, like a graphic designer or a communications person, whatever your needs are. So we're kind of, Paige and I are sort of agnostic when it comes to how exactly you want to earmark that staffing grant money. if that makes sense.
So are you going to be requesting some kind of financial accounting as this goes along?
No, I mean, honestly, one of the things that we try to do is make the administration and management of the grant really lightweight for you. And we work at a scale that's small enough that there's the oversight kind of comes out in conversation because we're keeping tabs on you, we know what you've proposed, and we can see your progress up close and personal. So we're not asking to see receipts or anything like that. Typically, with Partners for Climate Action grants, at the end of the grant cycle, you do submit our final report that basically says like what have you accomplished with the grant money and with the programmatic support. But that's it.
Further clarifying question about the money. If, you know, a municipality decided to utilize the office staff, could they be given a stipend or something, if it's on top of their other work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Kara.
Hi everyone. Back to this concept of the fellow being a shared role,
Hmm.
so to speak, um, and or an intern or assistant in that dynamic. Does the point person, the that's identified as the fellow, are they required to attend every meeting in Zoom, or would the intern slash assistant or backup be able to attend? I'm just thinking of bandwidth, right? And so if we identify a fellow and there's an intern in the works or what an assistant, could that backup be present in lieu of the fellow at various meetings? Or is it mandated that the fellow be present?
Ooh, this is a good question, Kara. I think the intention is that they're like that the Funding Futures Fellow um is present, is attending. And of course things come up in life,
Sure.
and things happen, emergencies happen, there's snow days, kids are home from school, that sort of thing. But I think by default the expectation is that the Funding Futures Fellow is present, and is part of the cohort is really being present and accountable to the other three communities so that there's a richness and a shared experience there. And Paige, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm appreciating what you're asking, Cara, and I'm just thinking that for local champions, we had a stipulation that we needed people to have an attendance of 75% at least for the whole year. So, of course, we would give a grace if someone couldn't make it, and it's great if you had a couple of people that you were working alongside with, if they could come when you couldn't. If it did arise that you couldn't, that would be great as long as there was communication. That would really help your process. I mean, that's really what we're thinking of. Um, is the continuity of your process. So anyway, we would work with you, but yeah, we're hoping that the Funding Futures Fellow they'll be able to attend as much as possible.
Understood. Thanks.
Deborah?
Yeah. I have a scenario which I just want to present as an anecdote to see your thinking on this. Like, if there's a municipality that is interested, it's really a question of what comes first. Like this program is really about, polling the community, connecting with the community, activating them, and finding out what's most important to the community, and then implementing those. If there's an existing interest in composting, for instance,
Mhm.
which requires a lot of logistics and some money and volunteers, and how could a municipality, you see what I'm getting at? How could they would that be something they would do separate from this program, or is there a way this program could be utilized to explore that possibility?
Yeah, I think that what you're applying for is is a way to go out and hear what your community, what most people in your community really care about, right? And so in any given town, there's already ideas that are floating around, right? And so of course, like those ideas will come up in the conversations. But I think our what we're going to be asking you to do is to just go out and ask, literally ask questions like, where do you think is really beautiful and that we should preserve? And like, what do you really care about? What do you think makes a healthy environment? Like, what do you think we could do? And those open-ended questions is what we're going to be asking you to use as prompts. So like I think the idea is not for you to go out and be like, hey, what do you think about composting? You know what I mean? Because we really believe that it's in the process of having the open-ended conversations is that's where you get the buy-in from. Like people feel like they're more part of it than someone coming and be like, hey, my idea is composting and like I want you to get in line and back me up. Um, but I think you know what I'm saying? It's not
Yeah, that makes
it,
perfect sense.
okay.
Thank
And
you.
but I would say if composting you feel is like really something that's kind of like a hot idea where you live, then I'm sure it will probably come to the surface in one way or another, and you'll get to see, does the rest of the community think it's important, right?
Right.
I'll just add, Deborah, I mean, part of why Vanessa and I started this program, we learned that any project that you might like composting that you might propose to your community, or if a town board or village board might, is so much stronger if people feel that they've been a part of making it happen and they've been asked if they want to do it. Um, and so anyway, we're hoping that whatever project is in the ether will be supported by this process even more and gain, yeah, consensus.
Yeah. I guess one of the just a little bit more about like one of the things that spurred us to do this project is over and over we see like something coming to the planning board, that a small group has all worked out and then they pitch it to the planning board and then people come out and they're upset because it's so easy to say no and to pick it apart. So what we're trying to do is to help you kind of like swim upstream of the conflict and start from a place of like, well, what do you want to see? What do we all care about? In our theory is that then those projects, by the time they get to the implementation phase, the buy-in is already built in.
We also saw that this was a pattern sort of nationally, across the board, people get upset if they're not asked. And so, yeah, just as Vanessa said, we want to swim upstream from that.
Um, you earlier spoke about your theory of change in this, and I'm curious if you were to give any of us a syllabus or something like read Peter Block's work or read so and so's work. This is really the foundation of where we're gathering inspiration. Are there sources that you'd recommend us consulting?
We
Ooh,
have,
that's a lovely question, David. We haven't put together a reading list, but that's a good idea.
but I will say on our website or on the Funding Futures webpage, we have what different groups that have inspired us. I mean, a
Yeah, that's
biggie,
true. Yeah.
maybe a biggie that we've mentioned to you, David, I'm not sure, is Ecological Citizens Project did this community congress process down in Peekskill and also in Phillipstown, where they put up a mic at a community event that was fun and brought neighbors together in a different way than like a different atmosphere than a town board or village board meeting would be. And everyone could say for 3 minutes on the mic what they wanted for their town, to suggest a project. And everyone did do that. They had babysitters, they had food. And then they went about, gathering those ideas, putting them on a ballot, and we've really modeled this process in part on their process. That's one, but you'll see a series of groups there. Heart and Soul in Rosendale is also definitely an inspiration to us.
Hmm. Um, have you, so I'm brand new to this. Have you done this before? Um, and can you go over what the other group, the scenario, how it played out?
Polly, we have not done this before. Maybe we
Ah,
should have said that. This
okay.
is an experiment. This is a pilot for us. We have not done this particular program before. However, as Paige just mentioned, um, the Ecological Citizens Project, the Community Congress Project, they ran that in Phillipstown and in Peekskill, and found it to be really successful. So they're consulting with us on this project and really in support of us um, running this program.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And I think also the Heart and Soul group that Rosendale is a part of, that's a national organization that does it's a similar sort of listening, community building process, and then helping to guide you towards priorities and an actual plan. It's similar. Um, Whereas I think the only difference is ours is really kind of focused more on the environment, ecology, land use, climate.
Tara?
Hi, thanks. So I'm just looking over my notes. Are you going to share this recording with
Yes.
us?
Yes,
Oh,
we'll post this on the web page,
excellent.
and
Um,
I can follow up and email folks when it's up.
oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Vanessa. Um, my my notes, I got a little confused. After you were talking, it's kind of in the beginning, kind of breaking out the grant, it's training, and then kind of the education and the training, and then staffing,
Yeah.
essentially. Um, for the application, is it, I don't know, maybe I'm going to call myself out here, but is, I mean, we have lots of ideas, but we have to go through the training to solidify these ideas. So is it better for us to really talk, kind of hone in, focus in on priorities and our commitment and how we envision implementing and kind of coalescing and collaborating with stakeholders? Or is it, do you want us to throw out our ideas in our letters of interest, in our letters, in our application?
I like that you have lots of ideas. And I think what you should focus on if you really want to do this program and what you should ask yourself is like, do you want to do you want to really spend some deep time with your community discussing all of those different ideas and also see if other ideas emerge from the community? And do you believe that that process would help you get clarity on which idea should be the priority?
Mm.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Vanessa.
Okay. Amanda.
So the goal though is to keep this whole thing, the whole process focused on environmental, because if you just go and ask broadly to the community, what do you care about? You're going to
Yeah.
hear immigration, you're going to hear, housing, you're going to hear lots and lots of stuff. So
Yeah.
somehow having some kind of framework to start with.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think, as you're going through a community conversation process, naturally, all sorts of topics will come up. And probably most of those could be related back to the environment one way or another. Look at housing, for example. Well, then let's talk about, the balance between land conservation and affordable housing development. Let's talk about, how do we prevent sprawl and create, maybe denser urban centers. Let's talk about green housing. Um, let's talk about those things in relationship to the land, to the environment. And I think that's a lot of what we'll be talking about as a cohort is like trying to coach each other up on like what kind of language can we use um, to guide that conversation back towards the topic at hand. And and that's definitely something we'll be talking about. Yeah. And if other great ideas come up that and you just can't figure out how they relate to climate or environment, then save those ideas, but maybe that's for a different discussion at another time.
Yeah, so maybe you have a parking place where you
Yeah.
put.
Right.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of the experiment of what we're doing is just seeing if we can keep it focused in the way that relates back to PCA's mission. Any other questions? Ask away.
There's a question on the chat saying, could the letter of support be from a town's planning board as opposed to a town board?
No. I'm just gonna say no to that. You need your town board to be okay with this, you know? And if you look at some of the documents that we provide, the tips documents and the template letter of support, we even went to the extent of writing a draft letter of support that you could send to your town board. I think we're trying to support you and how to have the conversation about like, wait, what is this program? How does it relate to what the town board is responsible for? Um, and ultimately, like, I don't know, in my experience, like it is so hard in local government because you're so under-resourced and understaffed. You don't really have the capacity to go out and do a whole listening campaign like this, Like maybe when you're going door to door campaigning for reelection, you're hearing kind of the pulse of the community. But to really get out and reach people and not just the regulars that always show up at the board meeting, the handful of people who are tuned in, but to really get out and talk to folks, that's something that elected officials usually don't have the ability, just don't have the time to be able to do that. And so, like, we're hoping that you could pitch this as like, hey, this is going to be really useful for you. You're going to get a deeper understanding of where people's heads are at. And nothing is like legally binding, you're not, the town board's not going to be held to task, but it's research for them. It's information. I mean, but getting a letter of support from the planning board in addition to that town board would be great.
Hmm. Um, I, I I didn't know what I was getting into. But it sounds really fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
so, just to give you a little background, so I'm the chair of the Democrats in Armenia. I go out canvassing, we're going out petitioning, we're going door to door, we're saying howdy do. And I have concerns about um, bringing people together because we're so divided in this country and, presenting activities like we're going to go and pick up trash. It's not a Democratic or Republic thing, but let's all go pick up trash.
Mhm.
I'm also on the local gardening club, and I'm quite a gardener. And we have a local church that has a food bank and a garden connected.
Cool.
And yeah, and we have the gardening club interested in the Hometown National Park program by Doug Ptolemy
Yeah.
of, our backyards are more private land is owned than national parks, so let's plant natives in your backyard.
Yeah.
And we have a rail trail that runs through the town that, is underutilized.
Hmm.
And thinking, um, pollinator, up and down the rail trail, long-term project, how to that possibility. We also have a wonderful stream that goes into the Housatonic,
Hmm.
but it's clean and it's trout fishing.
Mm.
And that whole aspect of keeping the waters clean and
Yeah.
a big part of Amenia is its local beauty and ruralness.
Yeah.
Um, so I could really see possibilities of having, um, you know, this um, go someplace locally here.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, it's how do we feel about talking to people who are maybe from a different political persuasion than ourselves? It's I think it's kind of exciting to be able to have an opportunity to just be like, no, why you're my neighbor, what do we care about
Right,
this place?
right.
Let's
And
not
I
talk
think
about the
all
garbage on the
communities,
TVs. Let's talk about what's
yeah,
matters here.
all communities need a focus
Hmm.
in coming together, and the environment is a wonderful way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just say Vanessa and I are so painfully aware, I'm sure you all are, of the polarization and how it separates us. So we're hoping that this program will be an antidote to that in a lot of ways. And we're going to be building in programming that will help people with some experts who understand how we can better talk with each other, how we can be better listeners, how we can speak empathically and really, yeah, just we might have a guest speaker. We're not sure yet, but there's a group that does something called deep canvassing, where they go to people's doors and they really have conversations about the issues, but from the heart about like how it affects them and in a respectful way, really listening to each other. So we're looking for ways to crack that nut where we just sort of judge each other and assume that that person is different and wouldn't understand.
Yeah. Yep. And also we should plug on April 8th, Partners for Climate Action will be doing a what we call a morning coffee program. So this is where we have a guest speaker at 8:30 in the morning on Zoom. And for April 8th, it'll be a speaker.
Sorry, it's going to be April 10th, and
Oh,
this one will actually be a lunchtime.
oh,
Yeah,
okay. Thank you for correcting me.
sure, noon.
Yeah. So April 10th, Renee Lertzman, and she's going to be talking about communications around climate and this kind of deep listening. I think she's like a psychologist, I believe.
Psychologist, yeah, and she works specifically with people working on environmental issues. Um, and it's fascinating. We'll get into it, but it's about how we're all ambivalent about everything. So it's not that someone, let's say environmentalists push on something and try to drive people to do what they think is the right thing. It's that everyone is aware, many people are aware, but they feel many things about their ability to do that. So having a conversation that addresses their ambivalence and what they're weighing can often help them, move forward.
Mm.
Yeah, so look for that. Um, Hopefully, all of you are on the Partners for Climate Action newsletter. If not, um, I'll probably take your emails and put them on. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
just
do
go ahead
that.
and do that and do that on your behalf. All right, well, it looks like we're just about out of time. Thank you so much. Paige and I are really excited to potentially be working with you. And please reach out if you have any other follow-up questions. And really, time is of the essence for, I know May 23rd seems like a ways away, but I would encourage you to get on it if you want to apply. So, hope to see you again soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.